Hey everybody, it's your favorite gentleman on Gentleman Style Podcast Show. And today we have a very special guest. This man is powerful and he's here to help us take our business to the next level. So if you are a startup, if you're on the fence about getting into business or getting in the game, this is the show. This is the man you want to connect with. This is the place to absolutely be. Here we go. Everybody, it's your boy Marcus Norman, your favorite gentleman on the Gentleman Style Podcast shows. Today we have Mr. Kevin Mako. He's the founder and president of Mako Design and Invent, the pioneer firm for providing world-class end-to-end physical consumer product development tailored to inventors, product startups, and small manufacturers. And we're going to touch on the topics that are most important to your startup and your business and take things to the next level. Mr. Kevin, I will advise, lectures at the Masters of Engineering program at Ryerson University, and he hosts the Product Startup Podcast. So check him out on there. This man is phenomenal. He is going to help you take your business to the next level. So help me welcome my guest, Mr. Kevin Mako.
Marcus, love the intro. Much appreciated. Look forward to being on the show today.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's all you, brother. Sir, you are impactful. Thank you for joining us on the Gentleman Style Podcast Show.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Sir, diving right in. Before we get to the T of the show, I have to ask the question. Successful people have successful habits. They do things day in and day out, routine, rain or shine. What is one thing that you do that has led to your success in business? One thing that you do every single day that really sets the tone, and you said this is going to be a good day. What's that habit?
You know what? There's a lot of things that folks do. There's lots of great little tips out there. I'm going to focus on one that's actually pretty darn big. And the number one thing that I do early in the morning, and I've got my little routines, small things we could talk about. I do certain reading, this and that, get up, feel good, all the rest. But the number one thing that I do that I really advocate for everybody, whether you're in business, whether it's your career, or whether you're just trying to, focus on your family, whatever it might be, the first thing you can do is focus on priority. Really think that morning, what is the most important thing in my life, and how am I going to not the most urgent thing, not the thing that's really like you have to do, the thing that's the highest priority. Now, I'm not saying you have to do that before the urgent thing, by all means, right? If your house is on fire, get some water. But what I want to focus on is that that's great. Yeah, I think this is the first podcast I've been on that has an audio, a laugh track on. I got to give that one to you, Marcus. So look, the biggest thing is it's not to ignore the urgent things, and you're going to have them every day when you get up. But it's to understand what your biggest priority is, and then really think how you're going to weave that into the early part of your day and get that going first.
I love that. So is there a set time? One of the powerful things that I heard, I've heard that before. Is there a set time that you want to have your priorities straight by? Like, do you want to knock them out early, or do you want to reserve those for later on in the day?
Well, I'll give you my run through. I'm up at 6 a.m. because I got a kiddo. He's 10 months old, and I'm getting
congratulations.
At 6:01, he is up every day. Like, there's not that one day you're like, maybe this is the day. He's basically proven to me that that's not going to happen. So I am up at 6 o'clock in the morning, pretty much no matter what. Attend to the kid, do that sort of stuff, which is great. It's enlightening, puts a smile on your face. He's excited to see you. And then I get into the reading. So one of the first things that I do is spend anywhere from 15 to 30 minutes reading. I've got certain highlights of the day that are relevant to my industry. I've got certain blogs I subscribe to that are sent off. And that time window I have a bit of flexibility on, because if there's a lot to go through that day, I don't want to cut myself short. So as soon as I'm done that, I really am looking to get into understanding what my priorities are. Most of the time I figure those out the day before. It makes your job in the morning a lot easier. But then when you get into it, you really want to look at your day and say, you've got your emergencies, your priorities, start at the hardest, the most important first, work your way down. And that for me starts happening very early in the morning, so that I can get a real head start on the day before the rest of the world has woke up, before my phone starts ringing, which is a big key. Your mornings are amazing. And that's something that you can really use to your advantage. You've probably seen this from reading and whatnot. Most of the ultra successful entrepreneurs are getting up super early. It can be as early as 4 a.m, right? Because they just look at it as free hours in the early parts of the day where they're really able to focus and be attentive. So that's, just a quick little routine. I've got a few little sub routines I do through there, but that's the big stuff. That's the stuff to me that counts.
Kevin Mako, y'all. Powerful. As you said that, I instantly thought about The Rock, right? The Rock, the man literally said publicly, he's like, I live on 4 hours of sleep every single day. And I was like, that is impossible. But he does it. He's in film. He's an actor. He's a powerhouse, just like Mr. Kevin Mako. He's a powerhouse, just those routines. And that's why I ask that question every single time. So thank you for breaking that down so delicately, because it's necessary. And I want it to tune into people's ear. Sir, you could do anything. You've done, by your resume is extensive. You've done a lot of different things, especially in business and startups. Who is someone who got you into the industry? Because you could literally do anything you want. Who's been a mentor or a guide that has set your path for you?
You know what? I'll give you a recent book that I read that I think is very helpful to folks in the startup phase that I never had when I was growing up, and I think a great foundation piece. This is like even before you start learning about the ins and outs of starting your own business or scaling your business or even what you want to do with your career. Grant Cardone, 10X Rule. It's an incredibly powerful book that gets to, I would almost say in part, like the psychology behind how to get motivated, why to get motivated, how like you are responsible for being motivated and giving your best to the world. And as such, the world will give you the best that they have to offer back to you. He really kind of breaks it down. So I look at that as that kind of like early foundation level before you get into the hardcore nuts and bolts. If you're feeling like you're not motivated, or you're feeling like you don't understand why, you want to put in that extra hustle, or why you want to bring your A game to, every day, check that book out, and it'll really, really help kind of get that platform going. Because then after that, if you use a lot of those tools in the book, the actual specific knowledge, you'll find that path, but you can't find the knowledge without first getting the motivation.
That's true. Nuggets dropping juice. I wish I could give him this microphone so he could drop it, y'all. This is the nuggets that we need. We have one quick commercial break. You guys don't go anywhere. Stay tuned. Stay with us. Stay engaged. We'll be right back. Good day, podcast listeners. This is your boy, Marcus Norman of Gentleman Style Podcast Show. I wanted to let you guys know that we will be rolling out a new feature and adding a join sponsor button next to the subscriber button here at the bottom of your screen. Once you click the button, it will display 3 membership levels. Gentleman Gentry, which is our entry level, Duke Duchess, which is our season level, and the Emperor and Empress, which is our most sophisticated level, which you will receive unique perks and benefits at each differing level and gain access to our community tab. We will also be sharing polls, upcoming events, and interviews, as well as receive feedback from our sponsors directly. Your support helps me find new and exciting guests to bring to the stage live. Well, in order to get the higher end speakers, it requires, you guessed it, money. So thank you for tuning in to my channel. And if becoming a sponsor sounds good to you, then select the join button below and choose your desired sponsor level. Let's continue to grow and serve the future of generations of men and women to come. Love you guys. Bye. Hey everybody. If you are just tuning in, we have the incredible Mr. Kevin Mako of Mako Designs. This man just laid some foundational work. He talked about some morning routines that he has and that he recommends to his clients and his startups and his friends and family. That some of the things that we can do and those core successful habits, right? Having a priority, setting your priorities even the day before can be helpful for starting your day off on a powerful foot. He also had a book recommendation to really give you that foundational piece as well. The recommendation, Grant Cardone 10X Rule. That is a powerful book. Grant Cardone is intense in his own right. That man is he's on some other stuff, but he's right in a lot of regards. So thank you for that, Mr. Kevin. That is huge. So, Mr. Kevin, you have helped startups across the country. What are the top tips that you are recommending for startups or people who are on the fence about getting into business? COVID-19 was terrible. People were shutting down, restaurants were shutting down, PPP loan money, cryptocurrencies now in the mix. What are the top tips that you're telling your clients and startups now to do today? What's the pivot?
Look, if you're thinking about getting into business, you're thinking of becoming an entrepreneur, no matter what it is. I mean, I deal specifically in the physical product space, but the things that I see, the big difference between those who succeed and those who fail become quite obvious over the years. I've worked with over 1,000 hardware startups, so it becomes quite transparent that success isn't some magical formula, it's some unknown mythical formula. It really comes down to some core pieces. And one of the big ones that I would suggest in the early phases, especially if you're bootstrapping, and especially if you're budget conscious and you're trying to just get off the ground, maybe you've got a full-time job, but you're looking at doing something on the side as well. First things first is start small. We have something in the hardware space we call focus. We have an expression we use called brilliantly simple design. It's when we essentially look at this, whether it's a physical product like we work on, or whether it's a service-based business, or whether it's a piece of software, the same philosophy applies. Think of your first version as your absolutely most stripped down, simple, but high quality, well executed version of that business that you eventually want it to be. As a startup, you cannot afford to go full tilt. Every startup, every big company that you see today started with what we call MVP, minimum viable product, something that got them either to market or got them to investors to allow them to invest to then get to market. And then they evolved over time. So it's a really difficult exercise to do. And although it seems simple, looking at your business and being very honest with yourself to say, do I need this thing to be everything to everyone? Or really let me focus on a very tight niche, a very small demographic that I can service, or that I can provide a product to, or that I can create software for, that is an incredibly straightforward, simple, high quality offering, but that will be super valuable to this tiny, small group of people. Remember, there's 7 billion people on this planet. So even if you shoot for a very tiny fraction of a market, you still have a massive global market. It will be a long time before you saturate that. But what this allows you to do, when you really simplify your business model or your product or your offering, it allows you to focus on doing that at a very high quality, but also targeting those customers at a very high quality. So when I started Mako Design, the model hasn't changed since I started in high school 20 years ago. It's the exact same model. Really? High-end global caliber product design tailored to small hardware startups. That's it, right? So it's a niche within a niche within a niche. So we only focus on inventions, consumer gadgets, some with electronics, some not, a very small, narrow window of stuff that's intended to go to mass retailers and whatnot. And we only generally work with a portion of startups and a specific type of startups who are actually looking to build a product business, to actually be financially successful with their product. So it's a very tiny, focused target, and we were the first to do it. So first of all, it makes it a lot easier to be the first to market if you're very, very focused on what you do. Second of all, it allows you to execute very well. Third, by the time that you actually become the market leader, then it's very hard for someone to compete with because you are the specialist in that space. So that is one of the easiest things you can do, not only to keep your costs low in the beginning, but also to have a much quicker fast track to success by getting those people on board that are your end customers, your investors, your stakeholders, et cetera. It has to be specific, has to be narrow, has to be niche.
Woo! Did you see how he dissected that, y'all? Do you see? It's like a brain surgeon, right? He's like scalpel, scissors, sizers. He's dissecting that, and the way you broke that down was impactful, and the way you broke that down was tailored to the start. He's talking about startups, y'all. He's focusing on startups, a minimum viable product, right? You reminded me of something very crucial. I watched a lot of Shark Tank. I watched too much Shark Tank. But something that was on it was a lady. She was pitching to the sharks, and she had like 20 different designs of her product. And the sharks was like, which one of these is your top sales? Which one is actually selling the most? And it was like these three things. But she had like 20 items that she was selling, that she spent money on, that she spent budgets on. She trademarked. Trademark is an expensive deal, right? And so the sharks were like, get rid of everything else and just focus on your top three sellers. And so that's what you're talking about, right? Is what is that minimum viable product? What is focus on that? Get intensely focused, which is Grant Cardone again. Intensely focus on that. And did I understand you correctly?
Absolutely. Yeah. And here's the kicker. So you go to market with your very specific, very core product, and you're grappling with the fact you have those mental gymnastics where you're thinking, yeah, but there's so much more market out there. And if I only had multiple sizes, and if I only had it forwards compatible and all this, right? So you get through that, and it's a struggle, and you go to market. Nice thing is you will have a much higher probability of landing a sale when you can very specifically focus on that piece. But the real kicker is that when you start selling, your market is going to help you decide which features are actually important to them going forward, and which ones won't be important to them going forward, and which ones you put into the product which need to be improved or changed or got rid of altogether. So the beauty of going to the market, let's call it focused, is that you get this incredible feedback that helps you much more efficiently and effectively get your next version to the market. You look at something simple like the Apple iPhone, right? That thing has evolved over time. That actually evolved from from a music player, right? So you've got your iPod that eventually became the iPhone, and every year they create new versions, new features. They don't put everything into it. There's certain features like waterproofness that we've had the technology do since the early 2000s. But they only recently released them because even a company as cash rich as Apple said, this is a budget piece that we're not willing to spend money on now because our users, maybe for right or for wrong, we could debate that a different day, but one way or another, it wasn't until about the iPhone 10 that it became waterproof, right? So right. That's where, but even a company, and they're one of the most cash rich companies on earth. So if they're being selective with where they're putting their engineering, if they're being selective on their features, then you can be too. And then rely on your customers and your investors and your stakeholders to help guide you where you're going to spend that money down the road. You mentioned that lady from Shark Tank. I bet you something that's going to happen. She's going to release that first product. If she listens to them, she's going to release that first product or grow with that first one. Then her users are going to say, hey, you know what? We really would like this other one. And she's going to notice that there's a trend to one and not to another. So she will now learn what to actually start spending more money on as she goes forward, as opposed to just guessing herself in the early days.
Right. And we tend to do that. Oh my gosh, these are nuggets, y'all. These are nuggets. You're right. And we tend to build out our business far in advance before we've even proven the business model works. And so that's what he's talking about. And you're right. I think she listened. I think she narrowed it down to her top three sales, but let the market dictate what they want. Let your demographic tell you what you need, because what I want or what I like may not be my best seller. It may not be my bestseller. So absolutely.
And if you still, let me really drive this thing home. I run a product design firm. We make gadgets. The more complicated the gadgets are, the more money we make as a firm. It's as simple as that. Now, I'm the one out here touting everybody, including our clients, to make it as simple as they possibly can, because I know that even though it's for us, a smaller budget to deal with in the beginning, I know that the probability of that product success is going to be exponentially higher than the client that comes to us and is trying to put every feature they can think of into that product, connected with an app. It's got to have, Bluetooth. It's got to have LEDs on it. It's this and that. The person who does that is not even going to make it to market. Whereas the person who's lean and mean and really focused on their target, which also allows you to be much more focused on your message and your marketing, those are the ones that are going to be hitting the home runs and then be coming back to us for their second or third or whatever version as they become a big company.
I want to touch on one more piece. I want to talk about I want to go back to a little bit to the organic, growing your business, scaling your business organically. What's a way that you recommend or that you teach to, or you coach to, that businesses can grow and scale organically versus borrowing money and funding? The national debt right now is ridiculous. How can a business thrive and scale that you coach to organically using their own funds or other means?
Marcus, I love this question because this is how I grew Mako Design. I started this thing in high school as just kind of an idea. Then I incorporated it halfway through university, through college. I then went and I finished my degree there. I went and studied supply chain management at Hong Kong University. So I had my business school degree. Then I did my supply chain management degree, all the while building this thing in the background. And then when I graduated, I was like $50,000 in student debt. And I said, you know what? I turned down all these jobs. I picked the litters. I was class president at Harvard Business School's sister school called the Ivey Business School in Canada. I picked the litter of the jobs, what I wanted to go to, turned them down and said, please let me come back if I screw this up, but I've got to take a shot at this. And I went into it full time. And so one of the, the big keys to growing organically, and still today, we have no investors, no debt, no financing. But one of the big keys to that is you have to make sales before you service those sales, if you don't have the core skill yourself, right? So there's really two windows of thought when it comes to building your own business. If you have a skill and you've developed some skill, well, you could start selling that time essentially as a freelancer. That's step one. But if you don't have that skill, like I didn't, because I wanted the world's best engineers to be designing our client's product, I didn't want me to be doing it. So to do that, the only way that you could do that is by being very, very focused on what you're going to offer and convincing some early adopters that you are going to be special and you're going to create some value for them. And they're willing to essentially fund, but through paying you in advance or on a real time for that service or product or whatever else it is. Some businesses, it's easier than others. Obviously, service-based businesses, it's a lot easier than building a software company. But no matter what company you have, you can always start with a simplified version. There's always a less expensive, simpler, easier, faster to market version, which you can then use to either start getting customers if you don't want investment, or even if you decide that you really need more investment to get it to a certain level, then it gives you that opportunity to raise that investment, but now with a first MVP version of the product. So you're now worth exponentially more and you're selling less. One of the big things we tell startups as well, if you have to raise money, and in the product design world, a lot of the time you do, because you can't go to market without design, engineering, prototype, setting up production, et cetera. So a lot of the time you do need financing, but the really important thing to remember is don't give up too much equity too early. Because if you, and this applies whether you're thinking of growing organically or whether you're growing with financing, the further you can push it yourself, or the more sales you can generate yourself and use some of that money to put into, servicing or building or whatever it is, the further you push it, the exponentially more valuable your business becomes, meaning that you can give away much less equity for much more money, which will push you a lot further. And one of the big mistakes that entrepreneurs make is giving up, let's say 75, 80% of their business right from day one for a few $1,000, because who cares? It's just a startup. It's just a new idea anyways. And that's all great and sounds good, except when that business is a multi-million-dollar venture 2 years down the road because it worked, and now you only own 2 or 3% of the business because you gave away most of it before you even really started, you're going to be quite upset with yourself. So don't think about now. Think about 5 years from now, what position you want to be in, how much equity, how much control you want to have before looking back. And all this comes down to how much value, focus on a product, how much value can you create now to get either a good amount of funding in if you need funding. And if you don't need funding and you've really got something magic, people will pay you in advance for that thing if they truly believe that you are going to create, value for them.
It's true. So true. So true. We're going to go to a quick commercial break, y'all. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back.
I'm Marcus Norman, bringing fresh vibes to hot topics surrounding culture, relationships, business, finance, sex, dating, faith, and everything in between. Whether you're into passive income opportunities, trending topics and useful relationship tips, or dynamic guest speakers, there's something for everyone. You can expect all that and more every week. If you're down with this content, then consider joining our growing community by subscribing to Gentleman Style Podcast and smash the bell to get on our VIP list. Your support means the world. Thanks for watching. Link to my channel.
Hey everybody, if you are just joining us on the Gentleman Style Podcast show, I have the incredible, amazing Mr. Kevin Mako, and this man just spilled the tea on growing your business organically without funding, because we just came out of a pandemic. The national debt average is crazy right now. And so being able to grow your business, but also he pointed out, if you missed it, he pointed out putting that sweat equity in first before giving away equity too early on in your business, right? Jumping in before you understand the true valuation of your own company, right? And making the mistake of giving away because you wanted that cash. I need cash now. Bootstrap, hold on, stay in the fight a little bit longer, stay in the game a little bit longer and bootstrap that business. So when the real maturity happens and the real value comes, it'll be worth much more and you won't be kicking yourself because you gave away the decision-making ability on your company.
And you know what? I want to expand on that a little bit further,
yes,
because let's talk about what that means when you're putting in your sweat equity. How do you actually get to the point where a customer says, you know what, I'm going to pay you in advance, or I'm going to pay you in stages so that you can, of course, pay your bills to service that person? First things first is you've got to do everything that you can humanly do yourself to create as much value behind the project before you approach any potential customer. You've got to be thinking, okay, can you put up a website yourself, or can you use a website template? Can you get a writer? Can you get on podcast shows? Can you, what are all these different things that you can do? How do you build your platform in the back end, right? So maybe you haven't fully vetted out your service and you don't, you need to hire, like I did in the early days, you need to hire an engineer. Well, I can do a lot of work before I hire my engineer. I can build out how it's going to work, the processes, the plans, the business model, everything else. I can build a presentation deck to that customer. I can put a whole bunch of things together so that when I walk into that customer's door, I truly believe that I've done everything that I can humanly do without money or with my own bootstrapped money, so that when I ask them for money, I have put as much on the table as possible for them to say, you know what, I believe that you can do this. Because if you put in mediocre effort, you're going to get mediocre results. If you put in a ton of effort over years, right? If you are known as like the Instagram person for researching different types of doorknobs, and you know every different type of doorknob out there, and you go to a doorknob installation company and say, I haven't yet started installing doorknobs, but I am like the de facto expert. I've been putting in years of research into this stuff, and I've never installed one, but I know everything there is about these things. I can rhyme them off the top of the head. I've got 200,000 Instagram followers because I am the person for that. I can assure you that you're going to get some interest. I can assure you that you're going to get somebody, the right person, the right buyer that's going to say, you know what? That's an incredible story. You've put a lot of work into this. I do believe that you're going to be able to build value for me. Yeah, here's a little bit of money up front, or here's a letter of intent that I will purchase some services from you, or here's an initial deposit, or whatever it might be. So, that is really critical, putting that effort in beforehand so that you're really getting as much excitement as you can. Now, that's the first part. The second part is hustle your sales. You don't need anybody for sales. Pick up the darn phone and make a call, send an email, reach out to somebody on LinkedIn. You're going to get a lot of no's, and you shouldn't be discouraged by that. That when you put all that effort in, and when you put the effort and you put the presentation and you do all this stuff together and you reach out to your first, let's say 3 people, yeah, they're probably all going to say no, but you shouldn't let that discourage you, because all you need is one yes. It's very simple. If only 1 in 100 people say yes to you, well, you need to make 100 calls, and then you've got a sale. So that's the double-edged sword there. On one side, you need to build in as much value as you can. And on the other side, be prepared to just hustle. And then if you want to actually be pro level at all this, as you're reaching out to all these people, trying to pitch your idea, your business, your product, your service, whatever it might be, listen to their feedback. A lot of people are going to hang up the phone, but you're going to get some folks who say, hey, you know what? I'm not going to take it. And here are the reasons why. Then you can leverage that to say, hey, look, are any of the reasons that they said that they wouldn't take it, can I fix any of those myself, like without money or with a little bit of money? Two things happen there. One, you can come back to them at a later date to say, hey, look, those 3 things that you said were the 3 reasons you would not buy my product. I fixed all those. So can I turn that no into a yes? Second thing you could do is, now that you understand that pain point from an expert who buys this sort of thing, now you know how to go to the next person and approach them, understanding that those 3 things may come up with them as well. Now you can be proactive at getting ahead of those pain points to help them solve that problem.
And you've overcome that objection. Woo! Thank you. Thank you for taking that home. I couldn't say that any better. Hustle, 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 y'all. This is major. You've walked us through. We've bootstrapped our business. We've walked up the steps. We've taken the grind. We've hustled, and we've capitalized, and we've put everything we've had, and we've taken our company to a certain level. But you can agree, there is a tipping off point. There is a stagnation point where you can't grow anymore without some assistance, right? That's I've been guilty of it. I've been guilty of that, where I've stagnated my own business. John Maxwell calls it the law of the lid, right? I have stagnated my own business because I refuse to. Some people don't hire out, or they don't hire enough, or they want to keep all the money to themselves. Now I've gotten to the point where my business is topped off. What are some signs that I need to now either get some investors in, get some crowdfunding in, or I need to make a pivot or a change in my business? What are some of those telltale signs that you see in startups that was just one of them that I've seen, is like, you don't want to hire out, you want to hog it all? What are some other signs that businesses stagnate their growth?
Well, that's a great tip right out of the gate, right? You one of the biggest ones is don't try and do everything. You've probably heard the classic adage, work, on your business, not in your business. The more that you're investing your time into long-term thinking, and the less you're actually doing the servicing the work within your business, the much more successful you'll become in the long run. Even just from a learning perspective, you learn how to manage those things out. Even if you do take a hit, you do service at a slightly less performance because you weren't the one doing it. Well, you're going to learn how to shore those things up and solve those problems. But I also want to mention on that note, before we jump into kind of more tips on breaking through those glass ceilings, I also want to talk about not being afraid of the plateaus. I can tell you from my business, organic growth story, right? Started with a part-time industrial designer. Now we have 30 people in 4 offices from coast to coast. But I can tell you, it wasn't a linear, straight growth path. You will have those. For us, it was months. Different people, some people it's weeks, some people it's days, some people it's years. But you will have those points where things kind of flatten off and you feel like you've hit the ceiling. And a lot of people get afraid and pivot quickly, especially these days, because the word pivot has become so popular, and especially in tech culture and software tech culture. As soon as somebody's not growing at 30% year over year, they're like, that's it. We need to pivot, change everything, get on to the next thing. And you hear a lot of pivots. You hear a lot of pivot success stories too, right? So, right. I don't blame them, but you can't be afraid of them either, because that's the natural ebbs and flows in business. And what I do when I feel like we're hitting a point, and COVID is a great example. We didn't grow during COVID. In fact, I thought we would be hit quite hard. But what we did is we doubled down on everything else that we could. We said, okay, look, sales growth is not a priority right now. Let's just try and keep the sales where they are for as long as this thing takes. But in the background, let's work on everything else that we can work on, right? So let's work on improving processes. Let's maybe get a new manufacturing certification. Let's look at what other courses we can subscribe to. We took over the podcast, right? So now we run the industry's largest podcast. We took it over from a guy who was getting out. We were getting in. So perfect. Now we have a podcast, right? So there's a lot of things that you can do in a slow period, which basically builds momentum and power, so that when that fast period, or when the economy comes back, or whatever it might be in your specific situation, when that comes back, you want to hit the ground running. I had a great mentor of mine, John Rothschild. He owns it's still a massive percentage of a restaurant called Eastside Marrow's, huge chain. Then they end up buying all these other restaurant chains and just, anyways, multi-billion-dollar empire. And he said, look, when the economy, for him, it was direct correlation to the economy in the restaurant business. When the economy was low, less people went out for dinner. He said, people freak out. They make mistakes. They do crazy things. He said, look at it as if you're driving down the freeway and you hit a snowstorm. All you want to do is go slow and steady and get through the thing. So by the time when you get back out onto the other side, you will take off and be way ahead of everybody else. The people who try and do crazy things and get ahead, they will be slipping out and crashing and whatever else. You're the one, slow, steady, hold the fort, and feel comfortable with the fact that you're not growing because you're working on all these other things that'll be being very powerful. Anyways, the net result of that, he said, is after that 2007 crash, he said they had their best 2 years ever coming out of that in 2009, 2010. Because as soon as they just held the fort, reinforced things that they wanted to do internally. They didn't focus on growth. And as soon as things came out and the economy came back, they exploded. So that's, one of the, anyways, not to say that the real glass ceilings exist and you do need to learn how to punch through those as well, but also don't be afraid of the artificial, I would say, glass ceilings, unless you really truly feel like you are at a glass ceiling.
Jeez. So that's powerful. Thank you for that. And that's powerful. And I think you're right. Stepping back, taking the time to work on the systems in place, because that's also happened too. A lot of businesses are coming out of the pandemic and they're just screaming and they're opening, one location, two location because they've pivot. Like, for example, the biggest pivot of all, let's say real estate. The biggest pivot of all is because everyone's now working virtually. Companies that traditionally thought you had to come into a physical office space, well, now that physical office is shut down. And so now they have staff that are working at home. So I no longer need the physical office, or I don't need as big as an office I had originally. So I'm saving money. So now there's businesses that are now pivoting and are now exploding because they're saving a bunch of money because now they can hire virtual staff versus paying for this big office space and hiring less. And so that's a powerful pivot. But like you said, taking the time to say, well, let me slow down. Let me take a look at what I got here. Let me take what I can improve on now instead of, continuing to push sales or continuing to hire out, or we need to sell. So I need more salespeople. No, just improve on the systems that you currently have and just make them better.
And a couple things, that you can do to push through those ceilings so that they don't exist on the flip side is, and a lot of it's what we've kind of talked about here, but it's planning in advance and doing work, not for tomorrow, but doing work for 2 to 5 years from now. What efforts are you putting in place now? Because what happens is these efforts, although they yield no result tomorrow or even the day after or even a few weeks from now, as you start to do more and more of these long forward thinking things, they then start compounding. Like in a massive way, they start growing, compounding, amplifying. So you start to yield these crazy massive returns on investment. So what happens here is that you can be investing forward multiple months or even years so that by the time that maybe you are hitting one of those plateau points, so many of the things that you were working on over the last while are now pushing forward at such a freight train rate that it'll just blast right through that thing. And, I like one of the ones, getting more specific into the weeds a bit that you mentioned, Marcus, is, hire, find experts, get folks on board who are smarter than you at specific areas and get them to do their best work so that you can do your best work. But also when it's coming to these glass ceilings, if you see them coming, whatever else, then know how to invest forward. For instance, if you do think it's a sales lull, what are you doing in terms of marketing materials, partnerships, et cetera, now, so that when that comes, you can just turn a switch and amplify those things, make them stronger, more powerful. If you think that there's going to be a staffing shortage coming up, well, what are you doing today to take good care of your people? What are you doing to bring in other great people down the road? You might not need them today, but you may need them in 6 to 12 months. Are you working on that today? That's, again, back to this model of working on your business as opposed to in your business. And I'll tell you, you don't have to be in business to apply these principles. You can be in the early thinking stage of developing your product and still put these principles into place. Your ceilings will just be different when you start a business. Your ceilings won't be growing sales. Your ceiling will be like, well, how do I launch my new website? And I feel like I hit a point where I can't, or how do I start marketing, or how do I get the word out, or how do I get my service offering figured out? How do I get my product built? How do I get my app built, or whatever it might be? You're going to have these same ceilings. So the best thing you can do is just plan ahead.
Mr. Kevin, how can my audience connect with you? How can we learn more? How can we be a part of what the movement? This train has left the station, but it's not too late to get on board. How can we connect with you, sir?
Well, look, I'll tell you, if you're in the invention space or you have a physical product idea, check out the podcast, the Product Startup Podcast. We're on every player. If you want more information about what I'm doing or what I'm involved with, I'm everywhere. Kevin Mako, Mako. You can find me on LinkedIn and our website, makodesign.com, makodesign.com. We've got over 1,000 articles about starting up businesses, but primarily around hardware and that sort of stuff. So check us out. Feel free to shoot me a line anytime. Marcus, I appreciate you having me and inviting me to the show, being a part of this entrepreneurial movement that you're a leader in. So thanks again. Looking forward to talking again.
Absolutely. It's my pleasure, sir. It's my pleasure to have you. Thank you for giving back in this way. This is powerful. This was incredible, and this was absolutely necessary. Get connected. Check out that website, y'all. Get connected to this man. This man is absolutely a game changer for your startup, for your business, for your growing goals. So I hope, sir, I want to say this to you publicly. Don't give up. Don't ever give up. We need you. We need what you're doing. We need what you're teaching, because you're here for a reason, and you woke up with breath in your body, and you woke up with purpose, and you woke up with intentionality. And so please don't ever quit.
Thanks, Marcus. Much appreciated for those kind words.
Absolutely. And thank you, my audience, for tuning into the Gentleman Style Podcast Show. I hope this message has served you and inspired you to take charge of your life and to go after your goals and go after your dreams, because you are the most important thing. And so, like I end every show, take care of your family, take care of your business, and take care of business. This is Marcus Norman of Gentleman Style Podcast Show and Mr. Kevin Mako of Mako Designs signing off. Love you guys. Bye.